to the 22nd episode of Femgineer TV, brought to you by Pivotal Tracker. I'm your host, Poornima Vijayashanker, the founder of Femgineer. In this show, I invite innovators in tech, and together we debunk myths and misconceptions related to building tech products and companies. Now, there's been a lot of talk about what it's going to take to build the next generation of computer scientists. You're probably aware of the pipeline problem and a number of approaches that people are trying to take in order to fix it, as well as improve diversity numbers. And while there's all this talk and a lot of initiatives, we're really not sure which ones are working and which ones aren't, and whether it's worth investing in. And to help us out, I've invited Jessica McKellar. Jessica has done a lot of great work, especially at the high school level, and is going to be talking about the importance of a number of these initiatives. She is currently an engineering director at Dropbox and was formerly a director at the Python Software Foundation. Jessica began her career at KSplice, where she was an early employee, and went on to found Zulip, which was eventually acquired by Dropbox. Thanks so much for joining us today, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun. So I recently came across your work, which is fantastic, and I was just curious to know what actually got you introduced to computer science and into engineering.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not one of those folks who had been programming since birth. I had a computer in the house. My dad's actually a musician, and so his motivation for having computers in the house was to do sequencing for his music projects. But my first degree in university was actually chemistry. Cool. So I had a chemistry degree. While I was pursuing that degree, I had a lot of friends also pursuing computer science degrees. And I would sort of look at them out of the corner of my eye and observe what they were learning. And it seemed from the outside like this really powerful toolkit full of tools for solving arbitrary problems in the world.
Yeah.
That was really attractive to me. So I was doing my chemistry stuff, and that was really cool. But I decided to take a couple of CS classes just to see what it was like. Pretty immediately got hooked on it, ended up getting a CS degree, got a CS master's, and the rest is history. I've sort of been in computers ever since.
Nice. So was it the element of problem solving, or what was it that kind of drew you in?
Yeah, it's being able, it's computers being a part of solving a very broad range of problems in the modern world that's attractive to me. It's the problem solving aspect of it too. Computers really change the way that your brain works, I think, or learning how to program really changes the way that your brain works in an important way, I think. It's like you have this experience of like mastering a system and realizing that you can change the world around you. Like you can gather information, you can build something that solves a problem. I think it changes your relationship with the world to know that you can solve a broad range of problems by writing code to solve it. It's a very empowering mindset. Mm-hmm. So that mindset was really attractive to me also.
Nice.
The other thing that I would say is very important to me about the fact that I didn't really start programming until I was in college is that that meant I was sort of coming from behind against a lot of my friends.
Right.
So I really felt an acute pressure to catch up while I was in school. And I think that instilled in me an empathy for beginners that has influenced a lot of the work and the outreach that I've done in open source communities.
You probably came across a number of stereotypes as you were majoring, right? How did you kind of overcome that and decide, nope, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was at MIT, where actually the percentage of CS majors who are women is reasonably high for the United States. And I think I was actually fairly oblivious to a lot of this while I was going through it. After I had graduated, or maybe when I was in the master's program, I read a book which is now sort of a classic book in the field called Unlocking the Clubhouse, which is a set of longitudinal studies focused on a university in the United States that tries to understand some of the gender dynamics in computer science programs. And I learned a lot about what these stereotypes were from reading the book. And it was actually a really powerful book for me to read because it introduced me to a bunch of terms that ended up being really important. Like that book is where I learned about the concept of imposter syndrome, which is a thing that once there was a name that I could associate with it, I realized is a thing that I had experienced before. Right. And it was powerful to recognize that this happens in other people too. But while I was in school, I feel like I surrounded myself with peers who were really supportive. And in my work, joining KSplice as an early kernel engineering hire, founding Zulip, I surrounded myself with people who were friends who I trusted a great deal. My first really negative experiences with being a woman in computer science / as a founder, as a technical part of a startup was really sort of the broader internet.
Yeah.
So Case Wise had a really popular technical blog that I would write posts for, and that's where that's where I really got to experience people having commentary about me and the way that I look as part of being an author for these posts. Sure. So that part's a bummer. I think I developed...
But you kept doing it.
I kept doing it, and it caused me to develop something of a thicker skin about this. I'm glad that I was able to develop a thicker skin around it. I think it is unfortunate that seems to be necessary in some contexts. I don't think you should have to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you were at MIT, and you decided to move out to Silicon Valley. So what was kind of the decision-making? Why not stay in lovely Boston? Why come out all the way?
Yeah, so I love Boston. I love Cambridge. So CaseWise was entirely we started CaseWise in Boston, built the company, and it was acquired, and we stayed in Boston post-acquisition by Oracle. And we started Zulip in Boston as well. Mm-hmm. We came out west for the Dropbox acquisition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Great. And it's actually a little bit of a coming home for me. I was technically born in Fremont, California.
Oh, okay.
So I lived in Fremont as a kid. My family currently lives in Nashville, which is where I went to high school. I moved up to Boston for university, and I'm now back on the West Coast. It's a little bit of a journey home for me, which is kind of nice, actually.
Yeah. Myself, I started as an early engineer very young, 2 years out of college. And I think for a lot of our viewers out there who are early in their career, they might have a sense of fear or might not feel like they're ready to. I know I certainly felt that way. You also began your career pretty early on with CaseSlice and Zulip. What made you feel like maybe you were ready or maybe you weren't ready, but decided to take the plunge anyways and be that early engineer, early employee?
Yeah, well, so I'm fortunate that CaseWise was a startup that came out of the master's thesis of a good friend of mine from MIT. And so it was an opportunity to work with friends on a really interesting technical problem. Mm-hmm. So in some sense, CaseWise was a no-brainer for me. But a big part of it also, though, is that I really view joining the CaseWise team as a big sort of validating milestone for me in my evolution as a computer scientist. Mm-hmm. Because as we talked about a couple of minutes ago, getting started sort of later than a lot of my friends, working very hard at MIT to sort of catch up. The fact that, I of all people in the world, would be one of the people that they'd want to be a part of the early team was a validation of all the work that I had done. Mm-hmm. So that felt really good. And what's kind of nice about the CaseWise team is we've actually stayed together through a series of startups and acquisitions at this point. So I've had the opportunity to work with and to grow with a bunch of really good friends of mine. Uh-huh. We were together through CaseWise, through the acquisition by Oracle, starting Zulip, and then the acquisition by Dropbox, which has been really fun.
So talk me through what the acquisition was like from Dropbox and what your role has been since you joined.
Yeah, we were building out Zulip. Zulip is a real-time collaboration service for businesses, in some ways like Slack before Slack was Slack. Okay. And we were iterating on this product. We were pre-launch. We were out west thinking about fundraising. We have a lot of ties with Dropbox. The founders were contemporaries at MIT. Okay. And it made a lot of sense to have a conversation about where Dropbox was going and how Zulip might fit into it. We had that conversation. We realized that there was a lot of alignment about our missions, and we ended up joining the Dropbox family as a consequence, and we all moved out west, didn't lose anybody in the move. It's funny that having been through 2 acquisitions now, so the acquisition by Dropbox was very different from the acquisition by Oracle. Mm-hmm. Oracle has necessarily had to construct an acquisition process that can scale to support tiny startups like ours, but also like multi-billion-dollar companies. Sure. And so like a joke from the Oracle acquisition was like there were more team leads from Oracle supporting the acquisition than there were employees at CaseSlice. Oh, nice. Which is like an enormous endeavor because that's like the Oracle structure for doing acquisitions. Sure. It was a lot easier with Dropbox.
Yeah. Now, since you've been at Dropbox, what have you been up to?
Yeah, it's been an evolution. So I came in continuing to manage the Zulip engineering team. Mm-hmm. And we worked on a bunch of really high impact projects, which is great. a couple more teams sort of came under my wing as there was a management need for it. This ended up growing into a reasonably large organization, about 120 people who were building all of our platform software. So our desktop client, our iOS and Android apps, shepherding web as a platform, and shepherding our internal and external APIs. And that was a really fun, educational experience. There was a lot of important foundational work that we accomplished that I'm really proud of. And then now I'm in a sort of an interesting, somewhat atypical role for a company of our size, where so my formal title is that I'm the chief of staff to our vice president of product engineering. And what I do in this role, and I have an operations team that reports to me, and what I do in this role is really shepherd the life cycle of an engineer and really drive forward a lot of the org, people, and process parts of running an engineering org of our size.
Okay. So can you walk me through what an example of that looks like?
Yeah. So example programs that sort of fall in this domain include our partnership with recruiting, on our hiring process, our evaluation process, onboarding and mentorship, career growth, the way that we communicate within and outside the organization, community building within engineering, and more broadly with engineering, product, and design. So all of these things sort of fit together, setting up the right sort of operating cadence for engineering, things like that.
Got it.
Yeah. Which I really like.
Yeah.
Which I don't think I would have predicted a priori before I got to Dropbox.
Sure.
So I really like building from scratch. I've really enjoyed my time with these startups. It's possible that what I love even more is building sustainable engineering organizations, which you can really only do at scale, like once you're at a scale where that's important. And so having the opportunity to do that at Dropbox has been really, really gratifying.
Yeah. Now, that's your day job. And then you've also had a lot of other things going on, right? You were formerly a director at the Python Foundation.
Yep.
Talk me through what attracted you to that foundation and what the work was you were doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been very involved with the Python community over the last couple of years. This has included, back when I was in Boston, I was one of the organizers for the Boston Python user group during a really big period of growth. We actually grew to become the largest Python user group in the world while I was there. And we had a bunch of sort of diversity initiatives that were really successful that ended up being emulated by a lot of other user groups around the world, which is cool.
What are some of them so that people watching may learn?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And we'll get into this in just a second because it plays into... A lot of this is about pipeline, which we'll talk about in a couple of contexts. Yeah, I've also been the sort of the diversity chair for PyCon, which is a large annual Python conference every year, and I was the director for the Python Software Foundation. And so a lot of this work has been about promoting an inclusive community and a diverse community within Python. And so examples of initiatives in Boston with the user group, really treating this as stepping back, one of the most satisfying things about the work that I do at work and the work that I do outside of work is that there's actually a lot of similarities and overlap. So when I'm paying attention to recruiting and diversity and inclusive culture at Dropbox, the way that you think about this, the pipeline, the metrics, the accountability model, they end up looking very similar to what it takes to increase the diversity of speakership at an open source conference, for example. So I've really been able to reuse my learnings and talents across these domains. So in Boston, we sort of developed a pipeline model to where we would attract new, great, diverse folks to the user group through mostly introductory workshops, focusing on creating a welcoming environment for people of diverse backgrounds, and often folks who didn't have formal CS backgrounds. And then we'd follow up on that pipeline with project nights where folks could get additional support while they continued to learn and practice the language through practical projects. And that would sort of bring them into the more general user group content. And we'd have an effort to have a robust set of content that would be interesting to diverse backgrounds and experience levels month over month. Similarly, so as the diversity chair for PyCon, a couple of years ago, the statistic was that 1% of speakers at PyCon were women. And we decided, I and a bunch of other folks active in the community decided we wanted to change this. How do you change it? You set a target. You pay attention to your top of the funnel. You make sure you have an equitable evaluation process, and you then should see results downstream. And so over the last couple of years, we've boosted that representation from 1% to, I think it was 10% and then 15%. This past year, so 2016 PyCon, 40% of speakers were women.
Great.
And what's really exciting and important to me about this is this isn't like a hack on the system. Like I could get hit by a bus and this would still work.
Yeah.
We've demonstrated through the repeatability of this year over year that it's robust to the process by which we evaluate candidates. It doesn't have single points of failure in terms of who's doing the outreach. So it's been a real model for sustainable outreach that has a sustained impact that's been emulated by a bunch of other conferences. So that's been really cool as well. Nice. And it all gets back to the same thing. So like sustainable systems, it's exactly what I do at work, and it's exactly what I do in the open source community too.
Got it.
That's cool.
One interesting thing that you just mentioned about the pipeline problem was it sounded like you were cultivating talent. You weren't just expecting there to be groups of people lining up at the door, like knocking on your door, right? You were actually there in the community saying, hey, it's okay if you don't have a CS degree. It's okay if you don't know X, Y, and Z framework. We will come, we will train you. And then once we've invested that time, hopefully you will have the ability to then go out and speak, right? Is that
exactly
kind of what it was? Yeah. And walk me through what that sort of timeline and process looked like.
Yeah, and just to clarify, this is for getting someone from sort of like new person in the community to active speaker in the community.
Yeah, and let's assume, so do they have a Python background or are they
It depends, yeah, we've seen everything.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so even people that were brand new to coding.
Yeah, so here's my idealized pipeline in an open source community. So let's say what's like an ideal pipeline for getting someone who's totally new to the community sort of all the way through to being like an active leader in the community. And this could look like speaking, it could look like helping at a conference, it could like helping at a user group.
Right.
Like what is an ideal pipeline for that? And what we've seen, and we have a bunch of good examples of from Boston, is you need some sort of initial hook. So first off, hope your community actually has to be one that is attractive to and welcoming to people of diverse backgrounds. So like check that first and make sure that that's true. And if it is, have some compelling content that is advertised thoughtfully, that is proactive in its outreach to diverse communities, that brings them in for an initial touch point with the community. For us in Boston, this was often like short, weekend-long intro to Python workshops. Follow that up with a couple of additional touch points to just to continue building the relationship and to have opportunities for retention, in the user group. So this is things like the monthly project nights that we had, additional maybe intermediate workshops. And then from there, if someone's enjoying themselves with these events, they're likely to want to just attend general user group events, which is great. And then you can also start trying to hook them for additional engagement. Sure. So like the speaker pipeline that has worked the best for me is first, hook them with something really short and low stress, like a lightning talk,
right?
Like a 5-minute lightning talk, or maybe a low-key poster presentation. Sometimes this exists. Like posters are a thing that exists at PyCon, for example. And from there, you can get a little bit more ambitious with them. So a long-form talk or like a tutorial is maybe the largest investment that one can make. And this model totally works. So people will swear up and down that they're never going to speak at a conference. You hook them for a lightning talk, and then before you know it,
they love it.
They're giving a keynote at some international conference. Yeah. So I've seen it time and again, and that's the trick. Yeah.
And so that similar behavior or that similar system works for a company as well, right?
Oh yeah. A lot of this. I mean, again, step 0, you have to prove to yourself that you have an inclusive workplace that people actually want to join, that has equitable retention rates, equitable promotion rates, equitable comp, etc. So like check that the environment and the culture are actually going to support these hires first. Make sure you have an equitable evaluation process. And then, be really sort of intentional about and have goals and accountability around a diverse top of the funnel, run great events, do great outreach, and then if everything is equitable, top of the funnel equals results in the bottom of the funnel. Yeah.
So for some of the folks watching this, maybe they aren't in organizations yet that have that equitable footing.
Yeah.
How can you audit yourself, or what are some initial steps? What do you need to be looking for?
What you want to measure is probably a little bit different between a company where like an employer has obligations to the employees versus an open source community. But but things that you can check in both places include, number one, you actually measure.
Yeah.
You can't know if you're doing a good job or not if you don't measure it, right? So in Boston, we would count. Yeah. If the thing that we're trying to work on is engagement and retention of women in the user group, you can't know if you're doing them unless you count.
Right.
So count it, the basic math on who's showing up to your events and who is being retained, who is showing up over time. So in both places, you need to do that. And then certainly on the corporate side, the things that we talked about earlier, you need to be measured. You can't know if you're doing a good job or not if you don't measure pay equity, retention equity, promotion equity, things like that.
Got it.
Yeah.
What about quotas?
And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to say anything that's going to get me in trouble.
Sure.
But,
well, let me ask you this. So one stat is by 2020, there are going to be 1.4 million computer science jobs available in the US alone. And about 1 million of them are not going to go fulfilled by traditional recruiting practices. So given that, right, even if we said, quotas aren't a good idea, it's a bad thing, right? There's still this 1 million openings, and how would you go about filling that if 50% of the population isn't participating?
So there are a couple of ways to think about this. So one is, a lot of this is about top of the funnel.
Sure.
We're not saying don't evaluate, don't hire great candidates of broad backgrounds, but it's if you want to focus on increasing the diversity, and diversity, by the by, it's many axes. Right. It's an intersectional issue. But if you want to increase diversity at a company, in an organization, number one, you need to ensure that the evaluation pipeline is equitable. And then it's just a math problem if that's true. It's top of the funnel equals bottom of the funnel. So being smart about reaching populations that you weren't reaching previously to get great people into the top of the funnel. And then the evaluation process takes care of itself.
Okay.
Right? And now part of this, though, is that we should be, interviewing. So if we're talking about hiring for software engineers in a tech company, interviews are a pretty shitty proxy for success inside the company. So being really attentive to and thoughtful about the way that we're evaluating people and what we're actually evaluating, what signal that gets you. So what Dropbox has seen, and this is a common evolution, it's a pretty natural evolution. As you get bigger, you realize that there, some specialization has happened. There's an opportunity to broaden the set of profiles that would be successful at the company. When you're not dealing with with a one or two people anymore, you have great web developers, you have great infrastructure engineers, you have great UI engineers. You develop a greater sense of the range of expertise that contribute in a really productive way, and that allows you to broaden the way that you evaluate someone, which can broaden the applicant pool in a way that is really healthy for diversity. So it's never about I don't ever want to hear about lowering the bar. But it's about broadening the set of profiles that really do drive the business forward. So that's a big thing. I think one of the the great, it's some set of people are going to become extremely wealthy eventually off of solving the problem of folks who are very talented and very smart in other domains who want to pivot to a career in software. I don't think we've cracked the nut on that yet. The truth is, at least from my experience at Dropbox, coming out of a 3-month boot camp, totally cold going into a 3-month boot camp, that's just not enough time to develop a lot of intuition. There's a speed of light factor to developing an intuition around software engineering, but figuring out how to tap into this really great, this really great pool of smart people who will be successful with the right support or with enough time. That's a great opportunity for people to be solving that we haven't solved yet.
There's a lot of skeptics out there, right, who question the effectiveness of these initiatives and whether or not they're worthwhile. I think some of it is prompted by a conservative attitude. Another thing could just be the essence of time. We have to grow quickly. We're going to take the people that are in our pipeline. We don't have quite the bandwidth or the education level to manage a lot of this stuff. So how do you respond, or how do you kind of deal with that?
Yeah, definitely. So first, I don't really have time for skeptics.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so over that, and there's so much research supporting the benefit of a diverse workplace that I'm sort of over rehashing that with people. The thing that does happen that you've alluded to is we've got to hire so many people.
Right.
Often diversity falls by the wayside when you're just trying to get people in the door. I think what's going on when that's happening is sort of not properly integrating the impact of some of these decisions across all time.
Okay.
And so people are making a prioritization decision.
Yeah.
And the prioritization puts sort of meeting an overall set of hiring targets above the diversity of the team. And for some companies, that's the right call, maybe. Yeah. I might not want to work at those companies. Sure. So it's like up to them if it's okay with them to weed me out of the applicant pool. But the question is, like, how are you making those prioritization decisions? And what we've seen at Dropbox, what I've seen at other companies is great people don't want to work in environments that aren't diverse. And you lose out on a set of perspectives that cause you to make worse product decisions. And it's hard to correctly integrate that impact across all time. It's like less of a direct set of numbers than just did we meet our hiring targets for the quarter or not. But my suspicion or my belief, and I think Dropbox's conviction at this point is, if you do that full integration, the diversity part is important, and it's worth dedicating the resources at the expense of other types of hiring targets, potentially. Yeah. Depends on the company, it depends on where you are, it depends on what's going on. But I think people often undervalue, they incorrectly prioritize the diversity piece because they're not doing the full integration on the outcomes. Yeah, or there's a time crunch and they're being met with some pressure either externally or internally, right? Yeah, and then it's up to the leadership team, the executive team to do the correct integration and enforce that conclusion. So I know you said you're over skeptics, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are also over it, but let's assume, for argument's sake, that yes, diversity isn't a great idea. Let's stop worrying about it. There's still going to be people who are underrepresented, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the question then becomes people who are, for lack of a better word, missing out on opportunities. And is there importance in being proactive, right? And I think what you've mentioned with your work at the Python Foundation and PyCon is there is talent out there who, unbeknownst to them, may not be aware that computer science and problem solving in this space can be really enriching and fulfilling as a career. And if you start to cultivate that talent, you see these greater gains. But it's kind of taking that first step and being proactive about it, right? Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have time to touch on this fully, I don't think, but there's been a big evolution actually in like primary schooling in the US around getting more opportunities for computer science education and having it count in a more rigorous way as part of the curriculum. Mm-hmm. So a lot of this has been getting CS classes to count for math or science credit. AP Computer Science is the most gender skewed AP exam that exists. Yeah. And what's going to change is eventually this is going to become a required class. I'm confident in high schools in the United States, and boom, then you'll have 50%. Like then you'll have gender equity on who's taking these classes. That is going to open up a beautiful set of doors for who sees themselves as potentially being computer scientists in the future. And why is this important? Well, the world has a lot of problems. We need as many people as possible solving these problems in creative ways. And this is in tech companies, but it's also, it's like in the sciences, it's in government. I mean, programming, but really computing and computational thinking are going to be a part of solving most problems that exist in the world. So yeah, it's really important that as broad a set of people on the planet have access to these opportunities as possible. Because we just don't have enough people who who are thinking about these problems. For every laundry cleaning startup that's existing in Silicon Valley, we need 5,000 people who are bringing a computational thinking mindset to the U.S. government and making it better. So we need a diverse set of people who are have the opportunity, and then with that opportunity have the belief that they can change the world, and for them to then go do it. Okay. Now, you and I both have CS
backgrounds, so it's kind of assumed that we understand the challenges that are out there and the mindset of what it means to think from a programming standpoint. But for some of our viewers who either are thinking about it as a career or as a career transition, right? What is it about computer science and the fundamental way of thinking in that realm that helps us deal with a lot of these more human-centric problems?
Yeah, exactly. And everything comes back to systems, for me at least.
Yeah.
So learning how to program changes the way that you think about the world. In particular, it gives you this opportunity to become fluent in a system in an environment where you know that you can change things. Like there's a programming environment, but you know that you can build software, you can build libraries, you can change the libraries to make them do what you need them to do. So it's this very empowering experience of realizing that you can master a system and then change the system. It forces you to learn how to become a systematic debugger and to break down problems and solve them and debug them in systematic ways. So if your brain adopts this mindset where, like, even very complex problems, and there are very complex systems, and there are software systems, but there are also hardware systems, and there are also people systems.
Right.
If you develop the belief and the conviction that one can break it down into a set of tractable problems, you can debug it systematically, and you believe that you can change the system because you have this experience of doing it in programming, then I think you naturally become an activist in this world when you have that mindset.
So for our viewers out there who are either in school right now, or maybe they're thinking of doing a career transition into tech or into being a computer scientist, they might look at this and say, well, that's great, Jessica and Poornima, you guys have a lot of resources, you've got companies that are backing you with their man and woman power, but what can we do as individuals who are just kind of getting started? How can we, one, empower ourselves, and then later on empower our community?
So for empowering ourselves, and one great thing that continues to get greater is that I think the barrier to entry continues to get lower and lower for learning how to program and developing software engineering skills. The single greatest, my answer really would be customized to an individual, but
Sure.
as a blanket statement, the greatest thing that I ever did for myself as a software engineer was to get involved with contributing to open source software.
Okay.
I learned more doing that about software engineering than I ever did in school. I mean, my education was great, but in terms of the practicalities of distributed software development, where I really cut my teeth was in open source communities, and I encourage folks to take the plunge and do that when they're ready. Just so many of my great friends have come out of those communities. It's been a really enriching experience for me overall.
What do you think it is about the open source community that helps?
I mean, part of it is being a largely distributed development environment. Okay. So that really forces you to develop the discipline around communication, code reviews, clean, structured diffs, etc. That's really, really positive. It's like working together on a team in a distributed fashion. That's like as real as it gets.
Yeah. So you're both dealing with a system level, but you're also dealing with people.
Yeah, it's the code and the people. And as it turns out, which is no surprise to people who are software engineers, the people are maybe even the dominant component of what you're doing at your work day to day.
Great. All right. So everyone has their action item to contribute in some way, shape, or form to an open source project.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jessica. This has been great.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks to all you viewers today for tuning in. And special thanks to our sponsor, Pivotal Tracker, for their help in producing this episode of FemGeneer TV. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please share it with your teammates, your friends, and your boss. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive the next episode. I'll catch you next time. This episode of FemGeneer TV is brought to you by Pivotal Tracker. Build better software faster. This was our final episode for Season 2 of FemGeneer TV. You can watch previous episodes from this season on our YouTube channel. And be sure to subscribe to our channel to receive episodes for Season 3 starting in January 2017.